Hi, I'm Tom Stephenson, and welcome to Construction Business Management. This is our second module on this particular course that we're doing, and today we're going to be discussing the business plan, its purposes, and company value statements. So at the end of this lecture, you should have a good idea about the purposes for developing a business plan, kind of the why and how it can be applied, and the different types of business plans and the little plans that are within a business plan, the elements of purpose statements, which are really your mission, vision, and core value statements. How it works, and when it doesn't work. It does not always work, as you will see. And we'll give some case examples of where it's worked really well, at least in my opinion. So the business plan, why do we need one? Well, it helps us to organize our thoughts concerning the business. So if we're thinking about starting a construction business, a small construction business as an example, and generally that's how they start out. They'd start out fairly small and then they grow over time. Well, if we're thinking about that, it makes a lot of sense for us to put together a plan, especially if we're going to need financing and raise some capital to get that business started. Now, it doesn't always happen that way. You don't necessarily have to do a business plan to start a small business. Very often, it starts where an individual just has an idea, or maybe they even become unemployed and they have no choice and they start a business and doing odd jobs, and then it builds and grows from that point. But to be sure, at some point, it makes a lot of sense to develop a business plan. And that helps to set the direction and the course for that business. And especially when you start to grow and the business becomes more than just you, then you have to be able to coordinate and effectively utilize the people that you hire. And so it can be very helpful to have a plan in place that helps set the course and direction. But one thing I will say about planning, and I've got it in a later slide, is as Eisenhower said, plans are nothing, but planning is everything. Don't expect that this plan that you develop is going to go exactly the way that you structure it. But that's okay. We've got to have something to shoot for. We've got to have some aspirational things that make us move in that direction. And in the second module video to this, we'll get into goal setting and driving towards those goals and measuring them and seeing how we're performing, which is very important in a business as well. So really, if we think about areas, and really each of these product, we could slash that product into operations, marketing, management, leadership, and how we manage our actual business, and finances, the sort of challenges that we want to have, pro forma statements, looking forward in potential income that we can be going after and targeting, and also ensuring that we have things in place such as cash flow to ensure we don't have liquidity problems and other issues that come up that can be disastrous for a lot of businesses. It really forces us to really take a look and analyze these particular areas in depth. And that helps us. That helps give some clarity of thought. There's this saying that was sort of developed by Michael Gerber in a book called The E-Myth, the Entrepreneurial Myth, if you will. And he's got this title that Why Most Small Businesses Don't Work and What to Do About It. One of the big concepts he comes across in this book is that many entrepreneurs get caught up working in the business. They forget that in order to maximize success, they also need to work on the business. Now, in the construction sector, I think most of us get it that when we get projects and we get work to do, we're all in on those projects. The problem is we get into this mode where we're all in on the projects and we can't keep doing stuff, but we really don't improve our operations. We really don't improve our financial statements and our financial analysis of what's going on. We really don't have time to really think in depth about who we hire and the impacts of the people we hire have on the culture of our business as it grows, and how we're going to get more business and retain the business that we have. How are we going to grow this business? Because we're so stuck in our projects. So I think the title of this book is very applicable, particularly to construction type businesses, because that's when you're smaller and you're trying to grow out, it's hard to break through that. If we look at bigger businesses, which we look at both in this course, right? We look at how does a small business grow, but we also look how does a big construction business operate and how do you operate within that framework. When we look at bigger construction businesses, well, they have this down. They got to where they are by not only managing their projects, but also spending time to manage their businesses. Because if they didn't, at some point, one would have thrown the other out of whack, and that probably would have put them into bankruptcy or put them out of business. It's not just about in the projects, because then you finish a project, it's like, oh, we need another project. Well, you weren't doing the legwork of working on the business to ensure that you have other projects in the pipeline as you're working in these projects. And so then that's going to cause all kinds of financial issues for you to effectively run those businesses. So it means a lot of things. And I would, if I were you, think about that very deeply if you plan to start a business at some point. It's a failure of small businesses. And Gerber kind of comes across with the point, and he uses examples of construction businesses because they're a pretty good example for these types of businesses, that construction businesses, you get stuck in this rut and you really don't effectively grow the business. And it's not like you really have a business even. It's just like you're an employee. You're just doing work and you're constantly doing work and you're not really giving the business the attention that it needs. This does not mean that you're spending all your time working on the business and not in the business. Don't get me wrong on that. But many small businesses, they don't spend hardly any time on the business aspects. It's an afterthought. It's usually reaction mode when, oh my goodness, we have to pay the bills. Oh my goodness, we have to chase the accounts receivable. And it's sort of like after the fact reaction mode because they're so heavily invested in the project. So Gerber is very much about a systems approach so that you can scale businesses. Very much about scaling and thinking in terms of systems. And in part two, well, we'll start in this module when we talk about mission and vision. In part two of this module, we'll look at goal setting and the differences and the importance of goals, but also the importance of systems. And we'll try to combine that thought together. So we have to remember that often businesses don't take the time to focus on what is going on in the external environment. What's the rest of the world doing? What's going on? How might this impact my business? Because a small business or even the largest of construction businesses can't impact what goes on in the external environment. You know, you have a pandemic, doesn't matter if you're the biggest construction company on the planet. It's going to have some impacts on you. So you have to have a good pulse of what's going on in the external environment. Look at what the competition is doing. And again, I'll kind of try to frame that a little bit. You know, it's not that you're myopically focused on the competition only, because you also got to be innovative and creative in your own right as well. But you should have some good understanding of what they're doing, because there may be some opportunities. And they may be doing some things that give you some ideas that if you tweak it a little bit, you can go even further than they're going. So there's always these opportunities. It's always useful to look at what is the competition doing. And even if they're not even the competition, really maybe they're a few rungs down from you, it might be very fruitful for you to see what they're doing, because before long they could be accelerating past you. Review how satisfied your customers are. You know, some of the contractors that I've done work with, they'll have surveys, really in-depth surveys, where they want to find out how satisfied were the customers. It gives you really valuable feedback that you can sort of look at and determine this is really valuable. We've got to change this. And so review how satisfied, client first surveys. Review how satisfied their employees are. Many companies do that. You've heard of Canada's top 100 or the top 100 employers wherever you are, and where that is and where you stand. Well, they get that by surveying their employees. It's more value. Forget about whether you're in the top 100, just to have a good pulse on where your employees are at. and they don't take the time to do that. Specifically, mid to large size companies, they really need to get a good sense of how their employees are thinking about their business. Because if it's negatively and your own employees are thinking that way, then you really don't have an engaged workforce. You have a disengaged workforce. If you look at Gallup polls on how large the numbers of disengaged employees are in companies, it is a very, very large number that as a business, you want to reduce and you want to get that engagement. Make improvements to their business. Every business needs to improve. And I'm a big proponent of lean construction methodologies because lean is all about continuous improvement. It's really a cultural way of looking at things. A business needs to think in those terms. Wherever you're at now, you can be better tomorrow. It's constant and never-ending improvement that you are trying to focus on as a business. Because if you're not, you're going to be like we looked at in the previous module. You're going to be like a Kodak, or you're going to be like a Blockbuster, or you're going to be like a Sears. You're going to be left behind, even though you dominated your market at one time or another. And that's really where we want to also be looking at. We're not taking the time to adopt new innovative approach. We're just doing the projects, and we're not really thinking about what we're learning and what new innovative approaches that we can implement. So we're doing things the way we've always done them, and that's going to make you less profitable, and that's going to make you less in demand over the long term. And really understanding what's the most profitable aspects of our business and increase business in those areas. There's the Pareto principle, the 80-20 principle, which was actually adopted and brought into play by J.M. Duran and quality improvement movement that led to the Toyota production system, that led to lean construction methodologies. And a big part of the Pareto principle, it identifies a relationship between 20 and 80. 20% of our clients will bring in 80% of our profit, as an example. Now that number can be a little bit varied from that. It could be 30-70, but 10-90. But you know what? It's generally not that far from that. And so that can be very helpful to understand from a business perspective who are our most valuable clients, and make sure that we retain them. And why are they so valuable? And are there ways for us to get more like that? And are there some clients that maybe we'd just be better not doing work for? It is that is a possibility. People qualify you to determine whether they want to do business with you. Well, it works both ways. And in construction, it works with not only contractors to clients, it works with contractors to subcontractors. It works with contractors to suppliers. There is those relationships that when they're really good, they're really good. And when they're really bad, they're really bad. And I don't think we want to continue the really bad ones if we can't correct them. So the business plan that we're going to be discussing and we're going to be looking at in this course in depth really can be utilized, and it's useful for new and existing entrepreneurs, and usually for the following reason, right? One is a formal business plan. A formal business plan is used to raise capital. You know, if you need to get a line of credit from the bank, you need to have somebody invest in your business, you're going to have a business plan, and they're going to want to shoot darts at it. They're going to want to ask questions. So it has to be well thought through so that you can explain out any of the information in the business plan. If they can shoot darts at it and pick holes at it, you're not going to get the funding. So it has to be well thought through. So that's usually the first reason why you see businesses put together a formal business plan. But I'm going to say that you really want to have a business plan so it gives you a sense of purpose, it gives you a sense of direction, it gives you a sense of understanding, and it's a process that made you walk through those steps that really gave you a lot more clarity about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. Otherwise, you're kind of like you're out in the middle of the ocean and you're just weaving around going day to day. What a business plan is, and it isn't locked in stone. It doesn't mean that you can't change it when you get new and better information or you have new and better opportunities, but it definitely helps you to make certain decisions along the way. And there may be decisions that you may turn things down because it's not the direction you want to take your business in. So business plans should really answer these questions. What business are you in? Well, construction is a huge area, a huge proposition. We have ICI, institutional, commercial, industrial. We have residential, and within residential, we have low rise, we have custom homes, we have production building, we have mid rise, we have high rise, condominiums, we have apartments. We have a lot of different sectors within just the residential. In the industrial sector, we've got all kinds of different sectors. You could be looking at oil refineries. You could be looking at manufacturing plants. There can be all kinds of different sectors. And within those sectors, you can get specializations. I know construction companies that specialize in building mausoleums. I know construction companies that specialize in building water treatment plants. And then you have construction companies, they do a whole bunch of things, like some of the bigger companies that you might think about, like a Ellis Don, a PCL, a Turner Construction, a lot of different things that they do. But they know their sectors, and they've grown very large. They probably started out in a more defined sector, and then as they grew, they saw some opportunities. We'll talk about that a little bit later on too. You have to consider economic models. You have to look at, well, if I'm in this one sector, what happens if that sector tanks? Will we be able to survive? Different sectors have different economic cycles. Some have really boom bust kind of cycles. Others have much more steady kind of work. We've got the restoration and renovation sectors. Restoration, much more, less hills and valleys in it. Think about it. Condominium buildings, restoration work like balcony slab repairs, underground parking, curtain walls, roofing, all of those kind of things. Less peaks and valleys, more steady work, more professionally managed money with reserve funds coming from condominiums. Whereas if you have a sector like new residential housing, well, if interest rates all of a sudden go through the roof and there's a recession, you've got a perfect storm going on where people are worried about their jobs and affordability has gone through the roof, like it's gone down that they can't afford places. That's going to tank. But when things are good, low interest rates, very low interest rates. You got an attractive country that everybody wants to come to. You're in a very attractive global city. There can be a lot of opportunities that will have really strong cycles in it. So understand your marketplace as a business and understand the pluses and minuses within that marketplace. So who are your customers? Like, how will you serve these customers? Really understanding these customers. Is it a business-to-business relationship? So I do work for like colleges and universities and hospitals, and they're my clients because it's an institutional market. Or are my customers people, and this is their houses, and I do work for them in their houses. So who are my customers? You got to understand who your customers are so you can really understand what they want. And if you understand what they want, give them what they want. And then they're going to want more from you because not everybody does that well. So how will you serve those customers? What type of ownership structure we talked about in the previous module? What are your long and short-term business goals? We'll be talking about this coming up. What will be your approach to the market? How are you going to position your business in this marketplace so that you can get more clients and retain the ones that you have? Where will you be located? And what kind of office structure will you have? What kind of structure? If you're a bigger business, there's a lot of heavy thoughts that you have to do. Are we going to decentralize the business? And are we going to have divisions in different geographical markets? Are we going to be more centralized where controlling decisions are more made from head office? How are we going to structure this business? These are things that have to go through any business's mind as they grow to a certain stature or size. When you're starting out, it's more about, keeping our overhead costs low and trying to make sure that we are not overburdened with overhead costs when we're starting to ramp up till we get enough business that we should think about and we need to expand at that point. So that cuts into the physical facility requirements. And what are your financial requirements? And we'll be looking at financial statements. Every business plan is going to have a financial plan as part of it, where you look at your pro forma of income statements, balance sheet, and cash flow statements. And there's a bunch of little formulas that you can use that can not individually tell you how the business is doing, but collaboratively looking at them. It can give you some good indications of some potential strong points and weak points in the business. And then you can address them in advance of them becoming problematic. Will you need other employees? How will you hire, motivate, retain these employees? You know what? In our world today, employees and retention of employees and hiring fully engaged and motivated people, that's one of the biggest things you can do for your business. Don't take it lightly. Construction businesses have this history of, oh, we got this project, hire a bunch of people, and just sort of getting people with a pulse, and then this one didn't work out, get rid of this and this, and they don't have a real good understanding of that. The best construction businesses have a really good handle on that market, and they spend a lot of time in the hiring process. So if you're trying to get employed by a construction company and they're spending a lot of time in the interview process before they're hiring, I would take that as a good sign that they actually are a very well-developed business. If they're hiring you on a quick phone call, yep, you can start tomorrow morning, I would take that as a sign that this company is operating a lot in reactive mode. They might be a small business. You might see it as an opportunity to bring some of the skills you're learning in this course and others to that company, but you should also think about it, like how well organized are they? Because knowledge workers and construction requires very knowledgeable people, and the area of construction management and being able to organize complex technical aspects of the construction process along with all the soft skills that are required, it's rare. It's rare to get really good people in that way. And as a construction business, you're going to want to make sure that if you do hire the right people, you don't put them off by demotivating them once they start, because you're not really structured or organized well enough to keep them engaged. There's a lot of things businesses can do that they hire really engaged people, and then they, as Hertzberg's motivational theory would say, they have all these hygiene factors that they have in place that actually take away from that motivation level that they had. So consider that, and that's why we have to have an HR plan as part of our process. So a business plan, it can have at least two distinct functions as the operational manual. So that's kind of like, well, we don't need it for to raise funds necessarily. We need it to keep the ongoing running of the business going at a strong pace. So this is where we develop like a strategic business plan of where we want to take the business and making sure that all of the sectors of our business are focused in on the goals that we're trying to achieve. As a business grows, you get different silos that set up within a business, and then they start competing for limited resources. And sometimes they actually compete in a negative way because they weren't clear on the overarching goals of the business where you're trying to take it. And of course, then as a way to raise funds, as I mentioned, capital, financing, etc. So we can think about two ways, and sometimes they are mutually exclusive. Sometimes we're just doing this because we don't need the financial capabilities. We're really trying to work on the business with this. We're really trying to improve and expand the business. So that's where that side of the business plan comes in. For after funds, this is where that comes in. Sometimes it's both, because it's helping us to doing the second one helps us to get clarity on the first one. So the content, there's no one business plan of what it looks like, but generally there's going to be an executive summary, and that's usually like the first page, and that should excite whoever reads it to read more. If you kind of don't get people's buy-in in that first page, then all is lost. So if you don't have that buy-in on the first page, then all is lost. Because they're not going to read further and they don't really care, because they get lots of business plans. So if it's not exciting and interesting and looks like you have confidence that you can do what you say you're going to do, they're not going to read further. So the executive summary is really sort of a highlight of why this business plan is brought in and why this is being done, especially in the prospectus side of things. And the financial statements need to be thorough and extensive. They should have been vetted by your accountant to make sure that they fit GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, and that if they're challenged, you have the answers for them. So including pro formas, looking usually 3 to 5 years out. Where do you see this business in 3 to 5 years? Cash flow is usually just more immediate within the year that's coming to make sure that any liquidity problems, cash problems are identified in advance. So it usually has that kind of outward looking. And as I said, business plan isn't cut in stone that it doesn't change, but it is putting you through the hoops in the process of thinking through this. If you're usually a simple one to think about would be, all right, so in 5 years from now, we're starting this custom home building company and we'd like to be building 3 houses a year, right? We're this small company and we're just starting out. Well, in year 1 and year 2, maybe you only want to do 1 house per year. And then in year 3, maybe you want to do year 3 and year 4, you want to do 2 houses a year. And by year 5, you want to build 3 houses a year. So you'd probably start with the 3, and then, well, to get to 3, what do we have to do in the other years? So you kind of start with the end in mind and work your way backwards. And then your financial statements would show how this is going to grow from year to year to get you there. It's kind of that way of thinking about it. So you can be thinking about, with the end in mind, you could be thinking about the sector that you're going to be in, how much volume that your goals are going to be structured towards, moving towards, etc. So there's these purpose statements that we have, and businesses tend to have them. Small businesses, not so much. Ones that are forward thinking, that are thinking about these kind of things, because most are not. Most are just, like I said, and what Michael Gerber said in the E-Myth, most businesses, they started and they're just doing it day to day, and the person's coming home exhausted at night, whoever's running this business, and they don't feel they have any time to work on the business. I sometimes think about the UCLA Bruins coach, John Wooden. You can look him up, but he's one of the most successful college coaches in college history. I think they won 9 or 10 national championships in 11 years. Lots of NBA famous basketball stars came out from John Wooden's teams, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, just to name a few. And he's one of these people that lived to almost 100 years old, 99, and was trying to help coach people for many, many decades, and had sort of a number of theories and processes. And he had this one quote that always resonated with me. If you don't have time to fix it now, when will you have time to fix it later? I'll say it again. If you don't have time to do it or fix it now, when will you have time to do it over again later? Think about that. Well, in the business world, if you don't have time to do a business plan or to plan and have these purpose statements and goals and aspirations for your business now, when will you have time later? And if you don't, you're just going to be in this treadmill. The business isn't going to be getting better, and you're never going to get off the treadmill. And that's why some people in small businesses, they feel trapped, and eventually they close the business down and they go back to work with another company. So there's that side of the business. And then, you know what? Many of you that are watching this, maybe you don't want to start your own business. But if you are working for somebody that's entrepreneurial, maybe you can help them get to where they need to go to by providing them with some assistance and help in these areas. So it's good for you that way too. This course is not just about you starting a business, but it's also about understanding how you work within a business and the properties of running a successful entity and how you can contribute to that entity. So many of the most successful businesses will have 1, 2, or all 3 of these statements. I know lots of businesses that they'll have the mission and vision and not the core values. And then I know lots of businesses, they have the core values, but not so much the mission and vision. There's not a right or a wrong with this. But it is important, I believe, to have some purpose statements that resonate with the company, that helps the founder tell the story, and that story needs to be repeated over and over again to get that generation, that flywheel, as Jim Collins would refer to, in motion and turning. So this business really starts to build up momentum in a certain direction. So it's not going all over the place and willy-nilly, and there's no kind of plan with it. It gets people excited about it. So I think about that, and so purpose statements help with that. So I'll start with the mission, and we'll refer back and forth to this a number of times. Mission is really kind of like the purpose. What is the purpose of this business, right? What purpose is it serving? It can be also tied, sometimes the mission, like in general terms, can be tied to aspirational as well, although vision really kind of works that way. But mission is very often in the terms of the military kind of used on those terms with goals that way. But I also think about vision being tied with goals. So it depends on how it's developed. There's not like a mission police or a vision police or a core value police out there. It's really just developing an understanding from the business's purpose of what is our purpose? What are we trying to do here? And that can signal your employees and help them, if they really understand the purpose, when they have tough decisions to make. And as managers in a big organization, if you really understand the core purpose of the business, it really does help you to make those decisions. So I think about some of them, and one of the ones, companies that I've worked with over the years, Mattamy Homes, and they had this mission statement, and I actually have it over here where they have mission, vision, and value. So they're one that did all three of them. I think I got coffee stains all over it, so you'll have to forgive that, but you can sort of see where it's written there, and you can see the values in the middle and the mission and the vision. Particularly their mission and vision, I feel like they really use that as a driver for the business. In the early years of when I was working with them, helping them with some training and development, best homeowner experience. Best homeowner experience. There's a lot by what that says, and there's a lot by what it doesn't say. I always like that from that perspective. So best homeowner experience. It doesn't say best home. And I use this in a lot of courses I teach. And one of the reasons is I think it really sets the tone for a lot of things, whether it's site management, project management, business management, but particularly business management. Best homeowner experience. Well, it doesn't say best home. Could say best home. And I think a lot of companies might say best home, but for them, it didn't. So what they were really concerned about is that, because they deal with just production home building thousands of homes per year, they wanted happy clients. They wanted raving fans. They wanted people that purchased their homes to say good things about them. And to do that doesn't mean that because you know what? You could build the best home. You could build the best home and have somebody thoroughly ticked off with you. It's possible. Because during the whole process, it was difficult. Your selections, there was arguments, there was pushback. At the end of the day, the quality was really great, but that person would not be a raving fan. They would not be happy with that. They would kind of really, at the end of the day, be glad to be rid of it and probably say, I'm never buying a new home again. On the other hand, if you were very pleasant and professional through all the interactions, and sometimes it's the small things. I had students that over the years that they would did a co-op program with them, and at the end of the summer I asked them to keep journals, and they would have a journal that they would have kept during that process. And I'd read through the journals, and I'd see things like stopped and fixed flat tire, stopped and fixed flat tire, and I was always taken aback. What were you doing? Oh, well, you see, homeowners, purchasers, they would arrive on site and they'd run over a nail because there might be a nail on the road or something like that. And we'd make sure we pulled over and we helped them. Traditionally, I think maybe that might happen on some sites and probably somebody would be laughing out the window at somebody or not helping them at any rate. Or people would show up on the site unannounced. And because of safety reasons on construction sites, you want people to make an appointment, you meet with them, you make sure they got the safety gear on. But traditionally too, if they showed up without an appointment, you kick them off. Well, no, sorry. No, if they showed up without an appointment, well, here's an extra hat and here hard hat and here's this, and we'll go out with you very quickly. Do you mind next time making an appointment? Not to put them off. Those are the small things. Other things, understanding and setting the right expectations. We are a production home builder. This is the process, being very clear in the process, telling that over and over again so that it helps the product production and operations aspect of it. You can make your selections up to this date, making sure it's very, very clear up to this date. And making these selections easy to make, having this magnificent decor center where you've had designers do packages that makes it much simpler. People get stressed out when they got 1,000 decisions to make. If you can narrow down the decisions and they feel that those decisions were packaged by designers while still giving some latitude, that can be really stress relieving for people. Especially when they're like done by famous designers. So that can be helpful. I remember in the decor center, the head of the decor center told me one time that when the hardwood installer was installing the hardwood in the decor center, you go in there and you see the hardwood everywhere. They saw them pulling out pieces out of the bundles. And she said, "What are you doing?" "Oh, well, this one's got a flaw in it. I don't want to put it. The decor center has to be perfect." She goes, "No, I want the decor center to look like it's going to be their house. If they want natural wood has some flaws. Better they see a flaw in the decor center so we can explain that to them so they're not shocked when they see one." Or we could recommend, if you don't want any flaws, maybe a high quality laminate floor might be a better choice for you. So you can educate them and set the right expectations. Mission. That's basically knowing your purpose and understanding that. And once you see best homeowner experience, designing all the different components of the business around that, from the site to marketing to sales to closeout to PDI inspections, pre-delivery inspections, having that clarity and understanding, working towards the same purpose. That is very helpful. When a company does that, they live it and they breathe it. With businesses where they don't do that, or where it's actually worse, in my opinion, to have a mission statement that's there for marketing purposes. Meaning that you are just doing this for the outside. Like there's a lot of companies that do greenwashing. They say they're this sustainable company and they're really not. Or they do something that totally contradicts that, and then it becomes a big issue in newspapers and media. You don't want to say something you're not because it comes out one way or the other. And it can be a very negative thing. So you really want to sell what you're going to do and what you do, and make sure your employees and that you live up to that. Much worse to say something you're not. Much worse, because essentially that means you're lying about your business. And if anything becomes a media event, media will be all over that. Vision. Vision is the future. You're looking forward. Mission is, this is our purpose. This is what we do, right? Vision, and by the way, mission is something you try to have that's not going to change every day of the week. Mission is something that's really sort of a more stable thing. If it's changing every 6 months or a year, your employees are like, yeah, it's the statement of the month. Vision can change over time because you could achieve what you saw in your vision, and then at a certain point, well, let's recreate this vision now because we're really there. So you can think about it that way. You can have a vision statement, or you can have a series of statements. It can be done different ways, and you can you can Google this and you can check vision statements, and there's websites that are dedicated to mission and vision and core value statements. It should be something though that's been refined, that fits what's your business. It shouldn't be copy and paste from some other business and doesn't mean anything to you unless it really resonates, right? So vision is looking into the future, 3 to 5 years forward. It might even be longer. It could be 10 years forward or more. Could really sort of be that aspirational side of things. And that's really sort of setting the goal of overarching, without a lot of minutia detail, where we see ourselves in this period of time, right? So sometimes it's not as deeply defined as goals, but we'll get into the goals because the goals would be established from the vision. So that can be helpful. If it's not really clear, like either on the top level or the next level, then it's useless because it's like, I don't even know when we get there. So there's no way of really understanding that. So I'll go back to that, and I think it was here. Yeah, there it goes, the vision. The best home building brand in North America. I guess I should have washed that before I started. Always put my coffee on there. Best home building brand in North America. Well, again, you can read what it doesn't say. It doesn't say they started in the Oakville, really, and they kind of grew. There's only so much you can grow in the Greater Toronto area. There's no way you can be the best home building brand in North America if you only build homes in Toronto, or you only build homes in New York, or you only build homes in Los Angeles, or you only build homes in Vancouver. No matter how big those markets are, they're not big enough to be the best home building brand in North America. You've got to be distributed across and be building in many markets in North America to be able to do that. So they start in Toronto, or Oakville, if you will, develop that market. Well, it doesn't say best home building brand in Canada, does it? It says in North America. So that means from that point, and this was a vision, well, that means, well, not only do we want to spread across Canada, but we also want to spread across the US. So that's really sort of giving you an aspirational goal, or as we'll talk later, as Jim Collins would say, a big, hairy, audacious goal, something to strive and shoot for. So that really helps in that way to strive and shoot for that overarching area. So, of course, eventually they started opening up a bunch of markets, like in Calgary, Ottawa, Jacksonville, Atlanta, Phoenix, Minneapolis. I haven't even checked lately. So that's how they grow. And they got to decide, well, do we buy existing companies in those markets? Do we develop from scratch? What's the best choice? And different markets might offer different choices. And which market should we go into first? But that overarching vision gives them a direction, an aspiration, a big, hairy, audacious goal of where to drive the business. It can be very inspiring for it to be part of that in a business. So that's very, very useful from that perspective. Now, it should be something that you want to achieve to. And I remember they wanted to be rated number 1 or number 2. They're not the first company that kind of does that. Like General Electric did that too with Jack Welch. We want to be 1 or 2 in the markets that we serve in. And if we can't be number 1 or number 2 in those markets, then we want to sell this and go into another marketplace or another product based. GE, they're into a lot of different products, right? So they wanted to be number 1 or number 2 in the markets. At the time, J.D. Powers was doing all these surveys that would rate home building companies, third-party rating agency. So you had data that was reliable, that was being researched, so you could really get a good idea of how you are in those marketplaces. Not you saying that, it's a third-party rating. That's good when you've got an aspirational goal that you can have something that you shoot for, that you validate for when you get there. I remember at one time, I think it was McDonald's, going way back. They had the worst coffee. They really had lousy coffee. And at one point, they decided that they wanted to have the best coffee. And coffee would be rated in Canada. It would be rated by the Maclean's magazine. I think Canadian Business, well, they were owned by the same party, would rate the major franchises of coffee, like Starbucks, like McDonald's, and so on and so forth, Tim Hortons. And so, of course, there was like 10 of them, and I think McDonald's was like 10th. Well, over time, because they put a lot of investment into what would be the best coffee in that, and over time they did get up to number one in that category. I remember, and they still have a really really good, in my opinion, coffee compared to what it was, which was a disaster. I always remember this movie, Elf. It's a Christmas kind of movie, and it's got Will Ferrell in it, and he's supposed to be this elf from the North Pole, and he's outside this coffee shop, and he's kind of like a little bit clueless, and he sees the sign, "World's Best Coffee." Oh, world's best coffee. He goes in there and he drinks it, and he actually buys into it. But the world's best coffee, anybody can put a sign out, and lots of places do, "World's Best Coffee." To who? Like, you just self-proclaimed you've got the world's best coffee because you like it? Well, that's not really aspirational. How do you know if you ever get there? This is very measurable. You will know how you get there. And I don't think McDonald's got there in 1 year. They had to do a bunch of tweaking and adjusting, and they worked at it to get that up. And that was a validation, right? So you need to have some sort of something measurable. And as Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant and professor, said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And he, of course, came up with the concept of management by objectives or goals. Core values, the last one of the three is, well, what does this business stand for? What do we value? It's a guide for business processes. It helps clarify who we are as a people. Explains why the business behaves the way it does. It helps direct the people in the business to make decisions. Serves to stabilize and confirm the beliefs of the whole organization. And in these times that we've been going through, and as we go post-pandemic, I think about this example by Merck, huge pharmaceutical business, and it was started in the early 1920s, in that time period anyways. And the founder said their core value was to preserve and improve human life, right? And so corporate social responsibility, unequivocal excellence in all aspects of the company, science-based innovation, honesty and integrity, profit from work that benefits humanity. So there was this example that Roy Vagelos, a former CEO of Merck, was interviewed on, and it was that their researchers came up with this method of treating blind river disease. And blind river disease was this disease, and you can Google it and look it up, but basically that occurred in sub-Saharan Africa, and it affected millions of people. It would, very painful, make them blind, in some cases make people suicidal, and affecting millions of people. We don't hear about it. We're in the developed world, so we're okay. But there it was this parasite that would grow in the eyes, and it was transferred by flies. And they came up with this treatment, not directly, like they were working on something else, and it was this indirect treatment that they got this idea about. Now, to get all the approvals, and we know what those kind of approvals take on, trying to run all the tests and the phase 1 trials, the phase 2, the phase 3 trials, and all of that, was going to literally cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And the problem was, too, they looked at it, those countries couldn't pay for it. Like, they didn't even have the logistics to distribute it to who would need it. And so it's sort of like this thing that could help humanity, but they would have to spend a good chunk of their research dollars, and they're a publicly traded company. That's one of the issues with publicly traded companies, is there's this short-term pressure. We mentioned publicly traded companies in the last module to perform each quarter by the shareholders. So as a CEO, you have a lot of pressure. But at any rate, the CEO talked about their original to preserve and improve human life. And I kind of thought, well, how could we not do this, right? What would this say to the researchers? And if we didn't do this. So they actually did do it, and they actually did get involved with the distribution and the logistics, and it did and does have a huge positive impact on slowly wiping out blind river disease. So it has been a huge success in that way. And then he said, you know what? Indirectly, even though we didn't do it for those purposes, and usually sometimes when you do things for the right reason, a lot of things come back for that you don't expect. That really helps that business. And really, if you are a researcher, really you're not in a, once you get to a certain level of pay, beyond that, you don't really get highly motivated. But if you're a researcher, those researchers, they're of this line of thought, as Merck was basically when this was developed, to preserve and improve human life. You're really highly motivated. Now, if you're a company that wants to hire people and this word has kind of gotten out, it really helps your brand, and that makes it easier to attract the brightest, best, most highly motivated people. And as I said earlier, human resource planning, indirectly, this did a huge amount for them to raise morale and recruit the best research scientists for the future. So it was very, very helpful from that perspective, in his opinion. So that's really what I wanted to cover in this module. Coming up, we will have module 2B, which is going to look at goals, systems, and we're also going to look at grit and some of the things that's required to get businesses moving towards and achieving those goals. And we're going to look at goals, and we're going to look at systems, and we're going to talk about how they best interact. They are not mutually exclusive. We need to have both, which may go against some things that you may read in your background. But for now, that's what I wanted to cover. So this is Tom Stephenson signing off and wishing you a wonderful day. Bye for now.